Cadeby Colliery, 9th of July 1912. It was Monday night and everything seemed normal as the night shift went on. But on the south district of number 1 pit, something miners called a gob fire was smouldering. It had started in coal and timber left behind when the men moved on along the seam. Perhaps it was spontaneous combustion, and men had been working to put it out. It had restarted, and early in the morning of Tuesday, July the 10th, 76 years ago this weekend, there was a great explosion of gas. Every man on the South District was killed, except one. It was 5:30 by the time that sole survivor was able to reach the pit bottom to raise the alarm. He was dazed and hurt. His oil lamp had gone out and no other living being was left. 1912 is a long time ago now, and all that's left of the disaster is a memorial where you can read the story, but you're left to imagine the awful horror of that day. One man still lives who remembers. He's Mr. Cliff Jackson. He's about 90 now, still living in Cadeby, and he remembers that Tuesday morning with all the clarity of old age, remembering the distant past.
I was only a boy of 14 at this time. I'd been working at the pit about 6 months. I worked down number 1 pit next to the South District. I got down the pit that very morning. Didn't know there was anything had happened. Getting into the pit bottom, there were quite a few men knocking around. One man touched me and says, "Don't go away, boy." I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "There's been a big explosion down the South District and a lot of men has got killed, and we shall all be going back up the pit again shortly." Which happened, we all went back up the pit. Things started moving then. Volunteers went down, deputies, manager, under managers, a total of around 60 volunteers went down. The inspector of mines came. He ordered everybody out of the pit because there was 1 or 2 in number 2 pit. He ordered every man out of this pit except the men who were working on the explosion part.
Cliff Jackson of Cadeby, only surviving witness of the Cadeby Colliery disaster. Up above ground on that Tuesday morning, the news spread. Silent groups of people stood waiting, and then the bodies began to be brought out.
The shed, the pay shed on the pit top, on the bridge, was turned into a mortuary. And as all the corpses were fetched out, were placed in that mortuary. Some nurses, not from the hospital, but from the Cadeby and Cadeby ambulance services, they had the job of cleaning, washing and dressing the corpse, because there were some come out badly burnt. This went on all morning. A total of around 60 men must have been working in the pit at the time. 10:30 come. Another explosion. This was worse than the first. Only 2 men survived out of about 60 men working on the district. Only 2 men were survived. Remainder, managers, inspector of mines, deputies, all the men were killed with the exception of 2.
With 13 bodies still unaccounted for, the inspector of mines ruled that no one else must go down. 32 men and boys had died in the first explosion and 56 in the second, as Cliff Jackson recalls. It was a national disaster.
In the afternoon, the King and Queen, King George V and Queen Mary, who had been visiting Conisbrough the day previous, came to, they were still in the Yorkshire area, was notified of the explosion. They came to Conisbrough, went over the Cadeby Bridge to the officers on the pit area, pit bottom, pit top area, to condole and give the prayer and sympathy to the dead and to the relatives of dead. It was a grim time. After that, Thursday and Friday and Saturday and burial times took place. Procession, around 60 was buried in Cadeby Cemetery. A few at Conisborough, a few at Mexborough. And it was a grim time at Cadeby because there were nearly 60 coffins to be buried. A fund was set up for the victims, and that lasted until the last pound and the last whether had been paid out. Work had been suspended at the pit throughout that week. The weekend it was examined, the pit was thoroughly examined and declared for work again, bar the explosive area.
And what of the 13 bodies still down the pit? It wasn't until later that the whole story was told.
I learnt a lot of many years after. I learnt a lot of two deputies that was, one was a survivor out of the second explosion, the other one was a major worker in the recovery work of those 13 bodies. And what happened was this. They knew, as they couldn't go in and fight that fire, it had got to be dealt with by other means. And what happened was they pumped inert gas into this area to kill that fire. As inert gas is a deadly poison that it support nothing. No man could live in it. 10 to 15 seconds they were dead. Fires couldn't live in it. It was manufactured on the pit top, pumped down the air pipes, which was air pipes at those times. There was compressed air pipes, so they used them, and pumped inert gas into the explosive area to kill this fire. In the meantime, iron doors were set up to annex because they knew as this operation had got to be done by rescue workers wearing the breathing apparatus. 16 weeks went by before they broke them stoppage to go and explore. Cadeby rescue workers were the first to go through those doors and break the stoppings. And their first job was to go round, see the extent of the trouble, locate all the bodies. They're to be properly identified, there are no mistakes to be made. They're tagged and marked on a plan where they all was. Outside help had to be brought in to help the rescue work, which took several weeks to be complete. Rescue teams were sent from Wath Joint Rescue Station. This was a station where 6 or 8 pits sent men to be trained in rescue work. These pits supplied a team of men every morning, came to Cadeby from different pits to have a shift working on the recovery work. This went on for quite a few weeks. It may be 2 bodies, possibly 3 brought out only in a week. They used to bring them to the airlock, special coffins. They were brought out at the weekend and sent home with the knowledge as they got the proper drugs. No, they couldn't be opened, so they had to be satisfied as they got the proper drugs. This went on for several weeks until the last of the bodies have been recovered. The next thing was there's 5 ponies in the area, and they had the task of getting those 5 ponies out. Several weeks again, they got the last out. They all had a pit-top burial. That completed the recovery work. The rescue men had done a wonderful job. Work completed. Those doors were locked and barred, never to be opened again. That was Cadeby, 1912.